Every night feels colder without a man. Giant Apache girl told lone farmer. The sun was beginning to dip behind the distant mountains, casting long golden shadows over the wide fields that stretched around the lone farm. The air was dry and warm, but as evening approached, a cool breeze began to drift across the land, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and the whisper of the desert wind. The farmer wiped the sweat from his brow with a rough cloth, feeling the strain in his arms from repairing the broken fence that ran along the edge of his property. He had been working all day, and although the labor was exhausting, it was necessary. Without the fence, wandering animals could destroy his crops, and he could not afford that. The farm was all he had, and every corner of it demanded his attention, his care, and his constant effort. The farmer was a solitary man. Years of isolation had made him self-reliant, but also aware of the deep ache that comes from loneliness. Most evenings, after the sun disappeared and the shadows of the mountains grew longer, he would sit on the porch of his small, weathered house, watching the night settle over the fields. The world around him was silent except for the faint rustle of the wind and the distant cries of coyotes. He often thought about the lives of other people, families laughing together, children running across lawns, and wondered if he would ever feel that warmth in his own life. But life had a way of keeping him alone, and he had learned to accept it, though it weighed on him more heavily during the long desert nights. On this particular evening, as he tightened the last post of the fence, he noticed something unusual. Among the soft dust of the dirt path, there were footprints. At first, he thought they were from one of the farm animals, but then he realized they were human. Death, not only human, but enormous. The prints were deep and long, leaving an impression in the earth that suggested a presence larger than any person he had ever seen. He paused, his hand still gripping the wooden post, and looked around. There was no one in sight. A shiver ran down his spine, not entirely from fear, but from a strange sense of anticipation. The footprints led toward the nearby woods, a place he had avoided after sundown. The trees were tall and dense, their branches forming strange shadows in the dim light. The farmer hesitated. His instincts told him to stay close to the house, to remain in the open where he could see everything. But curiosity tugged at him, stronger than caution. Something about the footprints felt alive, as if they carried a story that wanted to be told. Break. Slowly he followed them, each step careful, listening to the soft crunch of dirt beneath his boots. As he moved closer to the edge of the woods, a figure emerged from the shadows. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, a mirage brought on by exhaustion and the heat of the day. But as the figure stepped forward, he saw her clearly. But she was unlike anyone he had ever encountered, tall and commanding, yet moving with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. She was a girl, but larger than life. Her eyes were deep and knowing, reflecting the colors of the desert sky, and her hair flowed down her back like a dark river, catching the last rays of sunlight. There was an intensity about her presence, a quiet power that made the farmer pause and stare. But when she spoke, her voice was calm, soft, and carried the weight of wisdom beyond her years. "Every night feels colder without a man," she said, almost as if she had been waiting for someone to hear her words. The farmer blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words seemed to vanish, replaced by a mix of wonder, curiosity, and a touch of fear. There was something haunting about her tone, something that reached deep into his chest, stirring emotions he had long buried beneath the routines of farm life. He studied her for a moment, trying to understand who she was and how she had come to be here. There was a softness in her eyes, but also a strength that suggested she had lived through hardships he could only imagine. She seemed at once part of the earth and apart from it, a creature both wild and gentle. The wind rustled the leaves around them, and in that silence, the farmer felt a connection, an invisible thread that pulled him toward her. Finally, he found his voice. Who "Who are you?" he asked, his words hesitant, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell of the moment. The girl smiled faintly, a small, mysterious curve of her lips. "I am someone who has wandered far and seen much," she replied. "I know what it feels like to be alone." "Nights are colder when there is no one to share them with."
Her words carried a quiet sadness, and the farmer felt a pang of recognition. He knew that feeling all too well.
The emptiness of his home, the silence of his nights, the longing for companionship. He had grown accustomed to it, yet hearing it spoken aloud by this extraordinary girl made it sharper, more real.
They stood in the fading light, studying one another.
The farmer realized that despite her imposing size and mysterious appearance, there was an innocence about her, a vulnerability that made her seem human, in a way that reached beyond the surface. He wanted to speak, to ask where she came from, why she was here, and how he could help her, but the right words eluded him. Instead, he nodded slowly, acknowledging her presence and her words. Over the next few moments, the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and the earthy aroma of the woods. The girl took a step closer, her eyes never leaving his. "You are kind to notice me," she said softly. "Most people would turn away. But you see me." Her voice was gentle, almost like a whisper of the wind itself, yet it carried a weight that made the farmer's heart race. He realized that this encounter was not accidental. There was a reason she had come to him, a purpose that he could not yet understand. As night began to fall and the first stars appeared in the sky, the farmer invited her to walk with him toward his home. The girl hesitated, then followed, her movements careful and deliberate. They walked in silence, the crunch of dirt beneath their feet and the distant call of night birds filling the quiet spaces between them. For the first time in many years, the farmer felt a sense of anticipation, a spark of curiosity about the world beyond his routines. When they reached the porch of the small farmhouse, he gestured for her to sit. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lanterns, and nodded. The farmer felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest, a mix of excitement and nervousness. He realized that this encounter might change everything. The nights he had endured alone might no longer be the same. As they sat together, the girl spoke of the desert, of the wind that carried secrets across the land, and of the quiet strength needed to survive in solitude. She told him stories of her travels, of places he had never imagined, and of the people she had met along the way. The farmer listened, captivated by her words, feeling as though a new world was opening up before him. He realized that for the first time in a long while he was not thinking about the hardships of the farm, the weight of his loneliness, or the endless work that awaited him. Instead, he was focused entirely on the presence of this extraordinary girl sitting beside him. Hours passed, though it felt like mere moments. The stars multiplied in the sky, and the night grew colder, but the farmer hardly noticed. He was entranced by her stories, her gentle voice, and the sense of connection that had formed between them in such a short time. There was a magic in the air, a feeling that something rare and profound had begun, something that could not be easily explained, but could be deeply felt. Finally, as the chill of the night pressed against the walls of the farmhouse, the girl stood. She looked at the farmer, her eyes carrying both strength and a hint of sadness. "I must rest now," she said softly. "But I will return." Her words were simple, yet they carried a promise, a reassurance that their meeting was not a fleeting moment. The farmer nodded, a sense of anticipation and wonder settling over him. As she disappeared into the darkness beyond the porch, the farmer remained standing for a long time, staring at the night sky. The wind rustled the trees, carrying the memory of her voice, and he felt a warmth he had not known in years. For the first time, the cold of the night did not seem so unbearable. For the first time, he felt that perhaps the loneliness he had accepted as a part of life might not be permanent. And in the silence of the desert night, with the stars shining above and the wind whispering through the fields. The farmer realized that something extraordinary had begun, an encounter that would change the course of his life, a connection that had the power to fill the cold nights with warmth and meaning. The next morning, the farmer awoke to the soft, golden light of dawn spilling across his fields. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of earth and dew. The events of the previous evening felt almost like a dream, yet the footprints in the dirt leading from the woods to his porch confirmed that they had been real. He rose from his bed, stretching his stiff muscles, and tried to focus on the work ahead. But no matter how he tried, his thoughts kept drifting back to the girl. The giant Apache girl who had spoken those strange yet unforgettable words. Every night feels colder without a man.
As he walked toward the barn to begin his morning chores,
Breath. He noticed signs that she had been there again overnight. Some of the wild flowers he had been tending were pressed down, as if someone had admired them. Tiny pieces of her trail were scattered near the edge of the field. It was subtle, almost easy to miss, yet he saw it. Something about these small details made his heart race and his curiosity grow. He could not explain why, but he felt an unshakable connection to her, as though she had opened a door into a world he had long forgotten existed. By mid-morning, he had completed the majority of his work, feeding the animals, checking the irrigation, and repairing broken tools. The solitude, once comforting in its routine, now felt heavy with expectation. Every sound, the distant crow of a bird, the rustle of the wind through the trees, seemed charged with meaning. He found himself glancing toward the woods repeatedly, wondering if she would appear again. Around noon, as he was hauling a bucket of water toward the barn, he noticed movement along the edge of the forest. There she was, stepping out from the shade of the trees with a calm and deliberate grace. Her presence was as commanding as the day before, yet there was a softness in her eyes when she met his gaze. The farmer felt a mixture of relief and excitement. He set the bucket down carefully, wiping his hands on his pants as he approached her. "You came back," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and warmth. She nodded slightly, her expression serene but unreadable. "I wanted to see more," she replied. "There is something about this place, something different. And there is something about you. I feel I can trust you." The farmer felt a strange comfort in her words, as though she had seen the loneliness he carried in his heart and understood it without needing explanation. He realized that her trust was a gift, one that had to be handled with care. They walked together toward the edge of the field, the silence between them filled with an easy understanding that needed no words. As the day passed, the Apache girl began to share more of her story. She spoke of her childhood, growing up in the wild, learning the ways of her people, and surviving in a world that often misunderstood her. She told him of long days under the sun, of nights spent listening to the wind, and of lessons learned from the animals that roamed the plains. Her voice carried a quiet pride, but also a deep sense of longing. She had wandered alone for so long that the idea of companionship was almost foreign, yet her words hinted at a yearning for connection. The farmer listened intently, captivated not only by her experiences but by the way she told them. Each story painted vivid pictures in his mind: the rustling of leaves under her feet, the shimmer of sunlight on a flowing river, the feeling of cold wind against her skin as she slept under the open sky. Rasp. He realized that she was more than just a visitor in his life. She was a window into a world he had never truly known, a life filled with both struggle and extraordinary beauty. As afternoon turned into evening, they returned to the farmhouse. The farmer invited her to sit on the porch, and she accepted, perching carefully on the wooden steps. She had an aura of quiet dignity, yet there was an openness in her posture, a willingness to share her life with someone she barely knew. He offered her water from the well, and she drank slowly, her eyes scanning the horizon as if absorbing the landscape into herself. They spoke for hours, their conversation flowing easily despite the strangeness of their meeting. Breaths. She asked about the farm, about his life, and about what it was like to live so far from other people. The farmer answered honestly, sharing his routines, his struggles, and the loneliness that had marked much of his life. She listened without judgment, her presence comforting, her attention unwavering. In return, she revealed more about her own hardships, the challenges of surviving in the wild, and the quiet sadness of wandering alone. It became clear to the farmer that this girl had faced a life of solitude far longer than he had ever known. Yet she carried herself with resilience and pride, refusing to let loneliness define her. There was a lesson in her strength, a reminder that life could be harsh and unforgiving, but that it could also be met with courage and dignity. Her words inspired him, and he found himself reflecting on his own life with a new perspective. As night approached, the air grew cooler, and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky. The girl stood and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out over the fields. "The nights are still cold," she said softly, almost to herself. "But they are not as empty as they once were." The farmer felt a warmth in his chest, a sense that the connection forming between them was beginning to fill the spaces that loneliness had left behind. He stepped closer, unsure of what to say, but wanting to share the comfort he felt in her presence. "You don't have to wander alone," he said.
Not here. Not with me.
His words were simple, but they carried the weight of sincerity.
She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the stars above, and for a moment, neither spoke. There was an understanding between them, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that was beginning to take shape. The Apache girl smiled faintly, a smile that was both mysterious and reassuring. "Perhaps," she said softly, "perhaps I can learn to stay. Perhaps I can find a place here, even if only for a while."
Her words were tentative, as if she were testing the possibility of belonging, of finding warmth and companionship in a life she had long faced alone.
The farmer felt a sense of hope that he had not known in years. The weight of loneliness, the endless work, and the quiet nights that had once felt oppressive now seemed different. There was the possibility of something new, something that could change both their lives. He realized that this girl, with her strength, her stories, and her presence, had opened a door to a world where companionship and understanding were possible. The night deepened and the desert wind carried a chill that made the farmer pull his jacket tighter around him. He noticed the girl shivering slightly and offered her his coat.
She accepted, draping it over her shoulders, and for a moment they stood together in silence, sharing warmth in a way that words could not fully capture.
The connection between them grew stronger, a bond forged not by time but by understanding, trust, and the shared experience of solitude. Before leaving, the Apache girl turned to the farmer and said,
"I will return."
"There is more I want to see, more I want to learn, and perhaps more I can share with you." Her voice carried a quiet promise, a hint of hope, and an invitation to continue this journey together. The farmer nodded, feeling a sense of anticipation for the days to come. As she disappeared into the shadows of the nearby woods, the farmer stood on the porch, looking at the stars and feeling a warmth he had not felt in years. He knew that his life was changing, that the quiet farm, the long days of work, and the cold nights were no longer the whole story. Breath. There was someone else in the world now, someone whose presence had already begun to transform the way he saw life, the way he felt, and the way he hoped for the future. But for the first time in a long while, he believed that companionship could be found in the most unexpected places, and that even the coldest nights could be made warmer by the simple presence of another soul who understood him. "Draven!" And as the wind whispered through the fields and the stars sparkled above, he realized that this encounter, strange and wonderful as it was only the beginning of a story that would unfold in ways he could not yet imagine. Days passed, and the relationship between the farmer and the Apache girl grew quietly but steadily. Each morning the first light of dawn would stretch across the fields, and she would appear at the edge of the woods, waiting to walk with him. Their routine became something both comforting and exciting. For the farmer, these visits brought color to the otherwise monotonous days on the farm. For the girl, they offered a sense of stability she had never known in her wandering life. She moved with a strength and grace that was remarkable, yet her eyes sometimes betrayed a hint of worry, a shadow of the loneliness she carried deep within her. The farm, once a place of strict routines and solitary labor, began to feel alive in a new way. She observed the crops, the animals, and the tools, asking questions with curiosity and eagerness. The farmer explained everything patiently: how to care for the soil, when to water the plants, how to mend broken fences, and how to tend to the animals that depended on him. She listened carefully, learning quickly, though she sometimes laughed at her own mistakes, which brought a lightness to the farm he had not felt for years. Right. Her laughter echoed through the fields, blending with the songs of birds and the rustle of leaves, filling the spaces that had been empty for too long. But life on the farm was not without challenges. The wilderness had shaped her into a resilient and capable girl, but the routines and limitations of human life were new to her. She struggled to adjust to the constant labor, the strict schedules, and the rules that seemed to govern every part of the farmer's life. There were moments when she became frustrated, her brows knitting together as she tried to understand why certain tasks had to be done in a particular way. Yet, the farmer never grew impatient. He guided her gently, offering encouragement and support, recognizing that adaptation took time and patience. One afternoon, as they worked together to repair a broken water trough, a sudden gust of wind swept across the fields. Dust and debris swirled into the air, making it difficult to see or breathe. The girl shielded her eyes with her hands, but one of the wooden beams was loose, threatening to fall. Without hesitation, she pushed it aside with remarkable strength, saving both herself and the farmer from harm. He watched in awe, amazed by her quick thinking and physical power.
Breath. You're incredible, he said, his voice filled with admiration. I've never seen anyone move like that.
I've learned to survive in the wild, she said simply. Strength is necessary, but so is caution.
Her words carried wisdom, and the farmer realized that her experiences had shaped her in ways he could never fully understand.
Yet he felt lucky to witness her resilience and to share in the small victories of each day.
Evenings became a time of quiet reflection and companionship.
After completing the day's work, they would sit together on the porch, sharing stories, thoughts, and dreams. The Apache girl spoke of the lands she had traveled, of mountains that touched the sky, of rivers that ran through forests, and of the creatures she had encountered. The farmer listened with rapt attention, imagining the scenes she described and feeling as though he were traveling alongside her. In return, he shared tales of his childhood, of the farm he had inherited, and of the lessons he had learned about life and survival. Despite their growing closeness, challenges continued to arise. Neighbors were suspicious of the girl, and rumors began to spread about the strange newcomer living at the edge of the desert. Some people whispered that she was dangerous, while others claimed she had magical abilities. The farmer felt a mixture of anger and protectiveness. But he knew the girl was not only harmless, but kind and gentle.
Yet, he also understood that the world could be unkind to those who were different.
He reassured her that she was safe with him, that the farm would be their sanctuary from judgment and fear. Nature, too, presented its own obstacles. Harsh weather tested their endurance and adaptability. One evening, a fierce storm rolled across the plains, with heavy rain and strong winds threatening to destroy the crops and topple the fences. The farmer worked tirelessly to secure the farm, but it was the girl who proved to be his greatest ally. She moved with precision and strength, lifting heavy tools, reinforcing the fences, and guiding the animals to safety. Together, they battled the storm, their combined efforts turning chaos into order. By the time the clouds cleared and the rain subsided, the farm had survived intact, and both of them were drenched and exhausted, yet filled with a sense of accomplishment. During moments like these, the bond between them grew stronger. They learned to rely on one another, to trust each other's instincts, and to share the burdens of life. The farmer began to see her not just as a visitor or a companion, but as an integral part of his life. The Apache girl in turn discovered the value of human connection, of having someone who cared for her well-being and who recognized her strengths without fear or judgment. There were quiet moments too when they simply sat in silence, observing the changing sky or listening to the distant sounds of the desert. The girl would often close her eyes, taking in the warmth of the sun or the softness of the wind, and the farmer would watch her with a mixture of awe and tenderness. He realized that these moments, though simple, carried profound meaning. They were building memories, trust, and understanding that could not be measured by words alone. As the nights grew longer and colder, the farmer noticed a subtle change in her demeanor. But she seemed more at ease, more willing to share her thoughts and feelings. Yet there remained a quiet sadness beneath her strength. One evening, as they watched the stars appear in the sky, she confided in him. "I have always wandered alone," she said softly. "The world is vast, and people are not always kind. But here, with you, the nights feel less empty." Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of vulnerability. The farmer felt a deep sense of empathy, recognizing the courage it took for her to express such personal feelings. He reached out, placing a comforting hand on hers. "You don't have to be alone anymore," he said gently.
Not here. Not with me. We can face the world together. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and hesitation.
It was clear that her past experiences had taught her to guard her heart, but the warmth in his voice, the sincerity in his actions, began to break down those barriers. Days turned into weeks, and their partnership became more natural. She learned the rhythms of farm life, and he learned to appreciate the wisdom and insight she brought from her experiences in the wild. They faced challenges together, from harsh weather to mechanical failures, always supporting and protecting one another. Through it all, the bond they shared deepened, becoming a source of strength, comfort, and joy. Gray. End of the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the fields in shades of gold and orange. The Apache girl and the farmer stood together at the edge of the farm. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of the desert and the promise of a new day. They looked at another silently, acknowledging the journey they had shared and the connection that had grown between them. For the first time, they both felt that they were not just two solitary souls sharing space, but companions who had found understanding, trust, and warmth in each other's presence. And in that quiet moment, the farmer realized that the challenges they faced were not just obstacles, but opportunities to grow, to learn, and to build something meaningful together. The Apache girl, too, felt a shift within herself, a recognition that she could find safety, belonging, and even love in a world she had long navigated alone. Bringing with it the cool desert breeze, they returned to the farmhouse, ready to face whatever the next day would bring. The farm, once a place of routine and solitude, had become a space of life, connection, and shared purpose. And for both the farmer and the Apache girl, the journey they had begun together promised not only survival, but companionship, understanding, and the quiet warmth of hearts meeting in a vast and sometimes lonely world. The days had grown shorter, and the nights colder, yet the presence of the Apache girl brought a warmth to the farm that the farmer had never known before. They had settled into a rhythm that felt natural, almost like the land itself had welcomed her into his life. Every morning she appeared at the edge of the woods, her tall figure framed by the rising sun, and together they moved through the fields, tending to crops, repairing fences, and caring for the animals. Yet, it was not just the work that bound them. It was the quiet moments between the labor, the shared silences, and the simple comfort of being in one another's presence. One late afternoon, as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, they sat together on the porch of the farmhouse, watching the horizon. The air was still, except for the soft whisper of wind through the grasses. The Apache girl leaned back, her eyes following the flight of a hawk across the sky. "I never thought I would find a place like this," she said softly. "A place where I can rest, yet still feel alive. Where the world doesn't demand I be strong all the time. Yet, I can still be myself." Her words hung in the air, carrying the weight of a life spent wandering and surviving. The farmer listened, feeling a mixture of awe and tenderness. He had always been a man of few words, used to relying on action rather than conversation, yet something about her presence encouraged openness.
"You are welcome here," he replied gently.
Desperate. Not just because I need your help, but because you belong. This place and my life have been waiting for someone like you. He watched her eyes soften, and for a moment, the distance between their worlds seemed to disappear. As night fell, the cold began to seep into the farm, and the Apache girl shivered slightly. Without thinking, the farmer pulled a blanket around her shoulders. She looked up at him, startled for just an instant, and then allowed herself to relax. "It is warmer now," she said, her voice quiet but filled with gratitude. The small gesture, simple as it was, carried more meaning than either of them could fully express. It marked a turning point, a recognition that they were not just companions, but allies who could protect, support, and care for one another. Over the next few days, their connection deepened in ways that went beyond words. They worked side by side in the fields, learning from one another, laughing at small mistakes and marveling at the quiet beauty of the world around them. The Apache girl taught the farmer to read the wind and understand the movements of animals, showing him hidden streams and herbs that grew in secret places. In return, the farmer taught her patience in the rhythms of farm life, the subtle art of tending plants, and the satisfaction of seeing small efforts grow into tangible results. Each lesson, each shared moment strengthened the bond between them. Yet beneath the comfort of their companionship, there was an undercurrent of longing. The Apache girl, despite her strength and independence, had never known true closeness with another person. But she had wandered the wildlands, trusted the land and its creatures, but had always kept her heart guarded. The farmer, too, had lived a life of solitude, his only company the animals and the land he nurtured. But now the presence of the other had awakened feelings that neither fully understood yet. Feelings of care, admiration, and a quiet desire for more than just friendship. Breaths. One evening, as they sat under a sky full of stars, the Apache girl spoke in a voice barely louder than the rustling wind. "I have never stayed in one place this long," she admitted. "And I have never allowed myself to feel connected to someone else. But with you, it is different. I feel seen." Her words, simple yet profound, struck the farmer deeply. He realized that she was expressing something more than gratitude. She was opening her heart in a way that few had ever done with him. Breaths. He reached out, placing a hand gently on hers, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath his fingers. "You are not alone anymore," he said softly. "And you never have to be. Not here. Not with me." The Apache girl looked at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight and something new. Hope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she could belong, where she could trust another person completely, and where the cold nights could be softened by the presence of someone who cared deeply for her. As the nights continued, they spent more time together in quiet reflection. Sometimes they sat on the porch in silence, listening to the sounds of the desert, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of leaves, the soft murmur of a stream nearby. Other times, they spoke of dreams, fears, and memories, sharing stories that neither had told anyone else. The Apache girl revealed her longing for companionship, a desire to be understood, and the sorrow of past rejections. The farmer shared his own experiences of isolation, of hard work, and of the quiet ache of loneliness. In these exchanges, they discovered a depth of understanding that words alone could not capture. The farm itself seemed to respond to their growing connection. Crops flourished under their care. The animals were healthier and more content, and even the wind seemed gentler as it moved through the fields. It was as if the land had recognized the bond forming between them, offering its own quiet approval. The Apache girl often paused to touch the soil, to observe the plants, and to acknowledge the life that they were nurturing together. For her, it was a reminder that connection was not limited to people. It extended to the land, the animals, and the world around them. One particularly cold evening, the Apache girl admitted that the loneliness she had carried for so long felt unbearable at times. Breath. Even with strength, even with skills. "The nights are still empty," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But now, with you, they feel lighter, warmer, somehow." The farmer pulled her close, holding her in a gentle embrace, feeling the truth of her words resonate within him. In that moment, the barriers that had kept them apart began to crumble. They recognized that their connection was not only a comfort, but a necessity, a source of strength that made the challenges of life more bearable. Their bond was tested in small ways as well. Harsh winds swept across the farm. Unexpected storms threatened the crops, and the routines of daily life demanded constant attention. Breaths. Yet, each challenge only strengthened their partnership. They learned to rely on one another, to trust each other's instincts, and to support each other through moments of fear, fatigue, and doubt. The Apache girl, once a solitary wanderer, discovered the value of human connection, while the farmer, long accustomed to isolation, found joy in sharing his life and responsibilities with someone who truly understood him. Round as winter approached, bringing with it longer nights and harsher winds, their evenings together became a sanctuary. They would sit by the fire, sharing warmth and stories, their hands brushing occasionally, their eyes meeting with unspoken understanding. The Apache girl began to speak more openly of her hopes for the future, her desire for companionship, and the possibility of finding love in a world she had long faced alone. The farmer, in turn, shared his own dreams, imagining a life where they could face challenges together, celebrate victories, and find comfort in one another's presence. There was a particular night, under a sky so clear it seemed to stretch endlessly, when the Apache girl leaned her head on the farmer's shoulder. Respite. They sat in silence, listening to the distant call of an owl, feeling the cool wind, and recognizing the warmth they provided each other.
"I have wandered for so long," she whispered.
"But with you, I feel at home." The farmer tightened his arm around her, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment he had never known. He understood, in that quiet moment, that their bond had grown into something deeper than friendship, a connection rooted in trust, understanding, and affection. The realization of their feelings did not come with grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It was subtle, unfolding in the quiet moments of shared work, in the laughter over small mistakes, in the comfort of a hand held or a blanket shared on a cold night. Each day, each moment strengthened their emotional connection, weaving a tapestry of care, respect, and love that neither had expected, but both cherished deeply. As the night deepened and the desert winds whispered through the fields, they returned to the farmhouse, ready to face the challenges of another day. Yet they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. The Apache girl, once a wanderer of the wilds, had found a place to belong. The farmer, once a solitary soul, had discovered the warmth and companionship he had longed for. Together they had created a life that was stronger, richer, and more meaningful than either could have imagined alone. And as the stars sparkled above, casting their gentle light across the farm, they sat side by side, feeling the quiet power of their connection. It was a bond that transcended words, a union of hearts and minds forged through trust, understanding, and shared experiences. In the stillness of the night, with the cool breeze carrying the scent of earth and wildflowers, they knew that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead, and that the warmth they found in one another would carry them through even the coldest nights. The first frost of winter had arrived, covering the farm in a delicate layer of ice that sparkled in the early morning sun. The fields, once golden and full of life, now stood quiet and still, awaiting the warmth of spring. Yet, despite the cold, there was a warmth on the farm that could not be measured by the weather. It came from the bond between the farmer and the Apache girl, a bond that had grown over weeks of shared labor, quiet conversations, laughter, and the small, tender gestures that speak louder than words. The Apache girl had fully adjusted to life on the farm. She no longer moved with hesitation or curiosity alone. Now she moved with purpose, knowing where she fit in this world. She tended the animals with care, repaired fences with skill, and worked alongside the farmer with an ease that made their days productive and their evenings peaceful. Presence that mattered. It was the companionship they shared, the understanding that they had found in each other someone who truly cared, someone who could face the world with them, hand in hand. One morning, as the sun cast a pink and golden hue across the frost-covered fields, the Apache girl stepped out from the edge of the woods, her breath visible in the cold air. She carried a bundle of herbs and wildflowers she had gathered from the hillsides, her face bright with satisfaction. "These will help for the winter," she said, handing them to the farmer. "Some of them can be used to warm the home and keep sickness away." Her voice was calm and confident, yet there was a gentle warmth that had not been there before. She had found a sense of belonging, a place where her strength and knowledge were appreciated. The farmer smiled, taking the herbs and arranging them carefully. "You've made this place better than it was before," he said softly. "The farm feels alive now, not just because of the crops or the animals, but because of you." The Apache girl looked down at her hands, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. For a moment, neither spoke. It was a quiet acknowledgement of the growth they had experienced together, the changes in their hearts and in their lives since their first meeting. As the day progressed, the two of them worked side by side, moving through the fields, tending the animals, and preparing the farmhouse for the long nights of winter. Every task they completed carried a sense of teamwork and mutual respect. The farmer noticed small changes in himself as well. He laughed more easily, felt lighter in spirit, and approached each day with a renewed energy. The Apache girl, too, had softened in her solitary ways, showing moments of gentle humor and tender care that had not been part of her life before. Evenings became a time of reflection and quiet intimacy. They would sit together by the fire, watching the flames flicker and listening to the wind outside. Sometimes they spoke of the past, memories of childhood, of lessons learned, of experiences that had shaped them. Other times they spoke of dreams, of hopes for the future, and of the simple joys that each day brought. Each conversation drew them closer, weaving an unspoken bond that neither could deny. Particularly cold night. The Apache girl leaned her head against the farmer's shoulder. The fire crackled warmly in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Breaths. "I have wandered so long," she whispered. "I have always thought the world was too big, too lonely. But now with you, it feels possible. A home is not just walls or land, it is someone to share life with. The farmer tightened his arm around her, feeling the truth of her words resonate deep within his heart. Then we will face this life together, he said softly. The farm, the nights, the days, they will all be ours to share. The days passed into weeks, and their lives became intertwined in ways neither had imagined. They faced challenges together. The harsh winds, the cold, the work that never seemed to end, but each obstacle became easier to bear with the other by their side. The Apache girl learned patience with human routines, and the farmer discovered courage in embracing companionship. They laughed over mistakes, celebrated small victories, and comforted each other in moments of fatigue or fear. The farm itself seemed to thrive under their combined care, a symbol of the life they were building together. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of fence near the edge of the property, the Apache girl paused and looked out over the fields. "Do you ever think about the past?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. "About all the places I've been, all the people I've met?" The farmer nodded, considering her question. "Yes," he replied. "But I also think about the future. And now that future is brighter, because it includes you." Her eyes softened, and she smiled, a smile full of trust, warmth, and hope. As the first snow of the season began to fall, covering the fields and farmhouse in a gentle white blanket, the sense of togetherness grew stronger. They moved through the snow carefully, tending to the animals and ensuring that the crops and tools were protected. The Apache girl marveled at the quiet beauty of the snow-covered landscape, a reminder that even the harshest seasons could hold wonder. The farmer watched her, feeling a deep sense of gratitude that she had chosen to stay, that she had brought life, warmth, and companionship to his once lonely existence. Nights were especially magical. They would sit together under the stars wrapped in blankets, sharing warmth and stories. The Apache girl spoke of her travels, of mountains, rivers, and forests she had seen. The farmer shared his dreams of seasons ahead, of hopes for a life that was full and meaningful. Each story, each shared memory drew them closer, building a bond that was unshakable. It was during these moments that they realized the depth of their feelings, not just friendship, but a quiet, steadfast affection rooted in respect, trust, and shared experiences. There came a night when the wind howled fiercely, and the temperature dropped sharply. The Apache girl shivered despite her layers of clothing. Without a word, the farmer pulled her close, holding her tightly as they sat together by the fire. The simple act of sharing warmth, of being there for each other in the cold, spoke volumes. "I never imagined," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly, "that someone could make the nights feel so different, so full of comfort." The farmer kissed the top of her head gently. "Because we faced them together," he whispered.
Over time, the Apache girl made a permanent decision.
She would stay with the farmer, combining her life in the wild with the quiet rhythms of the farm. She embraced the routines, the responsibilities, and the shared joys of life, finding balance between her strength and the warmth of companionship. The farmer, in turn, welcomed her fully, recognizing that her presence had transformed his world in ways he could never have imagined. The community, once wary of the strange girl, began to accept her as they witnessed her kindness, skill, and gentle spirit. People came to respect her strength and resilience, and some even marveled at the unlikely friendship that had blossomed on the edge of the desert. Yet the farmer and the Apache girl were content in their own world, knowing that what mattered most was the bond they shared, the warmth they created together, and the life they were building side by side. As winter began to settle in fully, bringing long nights and harsh winds, the two of them would sit on the porch together, wrapped in blankets, watching the snow fall softly over the farm. There was a sense of peace, a feeling of home that neither had known before. The Apache girl no longer wandered alone, and the farmer no longer faced the cold nights in solitude. Together, they had created a life filled with trust, love, and companionship. A life where the harshness of the world was softened by the simple act of being together. One evening, under a sky so clear that every star seemed to shine brighter than ever, the Apache girl spoke, her voice filled with quiet wonder. "I have traveled so far, and yet I have found something I never thought I would. Not a place, not land, not even freedom, but connection. A heart that understands mine." The farmer took her hand in his, holding it gently, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "And I have found the same," he said softly. "The nights may still be cold, but with you, they feel warm. And that is all I could ever ask for." The story of the Apache girl and the lone farmer became one of hope, trust, and resilience. It was a story not of grand adventures or dramatic battles, but of quiet companionship, the courage to open one's heart, and the strength found in connection. They had faced loneliness, the harshness of the land, and the uncertainties of life, yet they emerged stronger together. And in the gentle rhythm of farm life, amidst the snow-covered fields, the flickering firelight, and the quiet whisper of the wind, they discovered that warmth is not just a matter of temperature. It is the presence of someone who truly cares, someone who shares the burdens and joys of life. And so every night that once felt impossibly cold now carried a sense of peace and contentment. The Apache girl no longer wandered alone, and the farmer no longer faced life in solitude. Together they had built a home. Not just a house, not just a farm, but a life where two hearts met, trusted, and shared in the quiet, extraordinary beauty of companionship. And in that bond they found hope, love, and a warmth that would carry them through all the seasons yet to come.